On the Jacob Buehrer Show today, I am happy to be joined by Dr. Tim Shriver. How are you doing today?
I'm great. Thank you for having me, Jacob.
It's an honor and a privilege. Before we get into questions, would you like to explain yourself and who you are and what you do?
Yeah, so first of all, I'm a fan of yours. That's my number one identifier, and that's why I'm on this show, I think. Number two, I like to think of myself as an educator. I was trained as a teacher and worked for first part of my career in public education and worked to develop the field of social and emotional learning. So I like to think of myself as a person who has brought the worlds of education or tried to bring the worlds of education where we think about it as information and knowledge and bring that together with inspiration and connection. So I'm an educator who focuses on child development and social and emotional learning. I think I'm an activist. I'm a person who over the last 25 years has tried to expand the platform of the Special Olympics movement to bring unified sports to schools around the world, to bring athletes with special needs into leadership roles and to allow them the space and the platform to do their work and to advocate for what they think is necessary and important and to showcase their gifts, not their challenges, but their gifts. And then maybe finally, I'll say I'm a person of faith. I don't discriminate so much between one religion and another, but I do resonate with people who believe deeply in themselves, who believe deeply in others, who believe deeply in the future and in the beauty of this crazy world we live in, which sometimes does not look beautiful at all. But I believe that underneath all of these things is a source of goodness and strength. So, you know, I'm a son, I'm a husband, I'm a father, I'm a grandfather, and I'm an educator and an activist and a believer.
Absolutely. Those are all great things to have. So, of course, you've been involved with the Special Olympics for about 20 years now, a little bit more than that. What has that been like?
Well, I think it's been an eye-opening experience for me. I think, you know, when I was a kid and I was a volunteer for Special Olympics at your age or even younger, I thought I was helping out, you know, my peers, in effect, children who had special needs. They needed my help. Over the last 20 years, I've come to realize that they were actually teaching me lessons about how to be free of fear, you know, lessons about how to prioritize relationship over outcomes, lessons about the importance of valuing everyone's dignity, not just some people's, and certainly not some people higher than others. Lessons about the power of encounter, meeting each other to transform both people in a meeting. So all of a sudden, you know, a few years ago, I started to realize this is actually a program for me and for people like me who sometimes get trapped into thinking that, you know, some people are better than others, who sometimes get trapped into thinking some people don't matter, who sometimes get trapped into feeling sorry for people. Instead of respecting them and revealing, letting them reveal our own vulnerabilities. So, you know, Special Olympics, we've gone to 190 countries. We've had extraordinary events with big stars like, you know, Stevie Wonder or Eric Clapton or people like that, great Bono, great rock and roll legends and great movie stars and actresses and actors and all these kinds of people. But at the core of it, whether we're having Special Olympics events in Abu Dhabi, where we had our recent World Games, or whether we're having them in Indianapolis, the core experience continues over and over again to crack us open, all of us. You hear the athletes, right? At the beginning of the event, our oath goes like this. The athletes say it, not the stands, not the you know, the mayor or the principal of the school. The athletes say, "Let me win, but if I cannot win, let me be brave in every attempt, in the attempt." And I think that oath, try with everything you've got to win. But no matter what the outcome, hold on to your bravery, hold on to your strength, hold on to your dignity, hold on to your courage, let it shine. That oath, every time I hear it, it strikes me as an invitation for me to grow into a better person.
I absolutely agree with you. So of course, since you've been leading the Special Olympics, what would you say is some stuff that has changed that maybe wasn't there before you were there?
Yeah, I'd say we've have a whole new focus on unified sports, teams where people with and without intellectual challenges play together as teammates, not as volunteers and helpers, teammates. It changes sometimes volunteers feel like they're better. They don't say it this way, but I'm a little better, more privileged than those other people. When you're teammates, you're the same. You're on the same team, you play together. So unified sports has been a big change. We've added a big movement around health. We call it healthy athletes and healthy communities. What a lot of people don't know is our athletes, people with intellectual disabilities, experience enormous discrimination in healthcare all over the world. They don't get vaccines a lot nowadays in many countries. They don't get treatment if they're sick. They don't get transplants if they need one. They don't necessarily get the best dental care. They don't necessarily get eye exams, things you might take for granted. If you need glasses, you're going to get them, right? A lot of people with intellectual challenges don't have that experience. So we've added a big health program. We've added a big program we call athlete leadership, which is athletes themselves speaking on their own behalf. Not me speaking for them or volunteers or parents speaking for them, but them. What are your voices? What are your ideas? What are your visions? What kind of movement do you want to build? And that's changed everything. Because our athletes have a very distinctive view on the world, and it's quite stunning sometimes, jarring, challenging. So like right now we're in a global reckoning around issues around diversity and equity and inclusion. I'm sure you're hearing it in your school. I think we've got to make sure our athletes are included in that reckoning. There's a lot of pain in our culture, right? There's a lot of challenges, things to change. And we need to change those things. But we shouldn't leave out the athletes of Special Olympics. We shouldn't leave out their needs as we try to make the world more equitable and more inclusive and more diverse. They have a lot to contribute to this moment, a lot of joy, a lot of challenge, a lot of justice that's needed on their behalf, and a lot of, a lot of just power to open our hearts to change. Sometimes when change is forced on people, they resist it, they fight back. Our athletes tend to invite people to change without getting them so much into a resistance mode. And I think that's quite special.
Absolutely. And how can people in the community get involved with Special Olympics?
Well, they can volunteer. I mean, we're starting to reopen now with the post-pandemic world, starting to get people out. We need coaches, we need volunteers, we need donors. We need doctors and nurses and physical therapists and dentists and podiatrists and these kinds of people to come out and volunteer at our games as part of our Healthy Athletes and Healthy Communities event. We need schools to adopt. We call it unified champion schools, where all the activities in the school, they become inclusive. And we train young people to lead that change in schools, not just teachers or administrators or coaches or athletic directors or special educators, but young people themselves. So we're trying to expand that unified champion schools work around the country and around the world. So we need the same old things that we've always needed. We need volunteers with an open heart. We need generous people with open to giving financially to our movement. We need advocates to believe in the inclusion revolution, to sign the pledges and commit themselves to not using language like what we call the R word, not because we want to be like policing people. We don't do that. What we do is we challenge people. Don't use language that's hateful and hurtful. You're allowed, but we ask you not to. So there's a lot of ways to be a part of this revolution, I hope.
And of course, a little bit ago, you wrote the book, The Call to Unite. What was the purpose behind that?
The purpose was very simple. It was just to show that in a very divisive, very painfully negative, larger culture, most people want to live in a different world. Most people, Republicans, Democrats, black, white, rich, poor, gay, straight, heartland, coastland, ex-presidents, ex-convicts, homeless people, billionaires, they're all in the book. If you want to know what advice Oprah has for how to live a more inclusive, a more well, it's in the book. If you want to know the advice of Shaka Senghor, who learned a lot from being in solitary confinement about how to live a more present and open, and it's in the book. If you want to know from great spiritual leaders like Reverend Jen Bailey or Barbara Holmes, Reverend Barbara Holmes, they're in the book. Richard Rohr is in the book. The Dalai Lama is in the book. These are all people who said, yes, I don't want to live in that divided world. I don't want to live in the hate-filled world. I don't want to consume that my whole all day long. So we did a big, long, streamcast last year, and we invited everybody who contributed to it to let us put their contributions into the book, and all the proceeds from the book go to help us continue to grow this work of Unite.
Absolutely. And where can people go to get the book?
Well, they can go to Amazon or Barnes and Noble. They can go to unite.us, which is our own website, where you can learn more about some of the videos that are in the book on the call to unite. And hopefully you can't get them in the discount bucket just yet, but anywhere online you can get it, and it's also available on audiobook.
Absolutely. And what would you say is something, of course, that we could do? It's about your book, how you said to come together, really. How do you think we can do that in a time where we're so divided right now?
Well, I think there's a couple of things you can do. First, tune out the division. People in the news media and in politics are making money on you by making you hate other people. Now, listen to what I said. They're not just giving you the news or information. They're making money by your clicks, your eyeballs, your tuning in. And their way of making that money is to make it more likely that you will hate other Americans. Turn it off. Whether you get it on social media, on your phone, whether you get it on television, on your iPad, whatever it is, turn it off. That's number one. Because that's not the only story of what's going on. Yes, we have divisions, but that's not the only thing we have. Tune in, you tune that out, tune in to initiatives that bring us together. Tune in to civic organizations like Lions Clubs and Rotary Clubs. They don't sound sexy to your generation, but they're doing great work around the country. Tune in to faith-based communities that are active in the social justice space. Tune in to your own dignity. Sometimes learning how to be an empathic listener is a way of expressing your own dignity. So learn the skills of how to disagree without being disagreeable. It doesn't come naturally to a lot of us, but we can learn how to do it. So tune in to all that kind of work. And, I think if I could just give people one request, and that is when you see someone with whom you disagree, don't sacrifice your principles. Don't sacrifice what you believe. Just add one more principle. Treat them with dignity. You don't have to agree. You don't have to roll over, but treat the other person with dignity. We know a lot of language around this. Presume that they too have a story. Presume positive intent. It's not always obvious, but if we add that one principle to all the other principles we have, whether we're on the extreme right or left or anywhere in between, add one principle to your existing convictions, that you'll treat everybody with dignity. That, I think, can unlock an enormous array of creative energy to solve problems, whereas being locked into hatred makes it almost impossible.
I absolutely agree with that as well. Of course, you come from a family that's been involved in politics. What was it like for your dad? Was there any lessons that you remember him telling you, since we're just talking about division, politics, and everything, that he told you that you always remember about how we can come together in hard times?
Yeah.
Or your mom?
Yeah, well, my mom and dad had a couple of principles that I feel like I'm hearing anew at this stage in my life. The first is, in our house, hate was a 4-letter word. If I came in and I had a fight with Jacob at school and I said, I hate Jacob, my mom would have said to me, we don't use that word here. You can say you disagree with Jacob, you can say a lot of things, but you are not to say you hate anyone. Imagine if we had no hate in our culture today. I don't know, did you ever hear that lesson, Jacob? Is that something that came up in your family?
Yes.
Okay, but here's my point. Most of us heard that from our grandparents, from our neighbors, from our aunties, from our caregivers, from our parents. But we forget it when we get to be adults. It's like, okay, that was for kids. Now we're allowed to hate because we're adults, we're in politics.
Or when you get into high school even, or middle school.
And when you get into high school, yeah. So I'd say the one lesson that I remember now more than hate, no hate. Number two, my dad always used to say, there's no limit to how much good you can do if you don't need the credit. And I think a lot of times, I'll say this for myself, but a lot of times, you know, you want to do something, but you're looking around like, who's going to get the credit for this? Is everybody going to know I did it? Am I going to be the one seen as the most important person in doing the good? My dad always used to say, get all that out of your head. The joy in life will come from the good you do, not the credit you get. And I think that has been really important to me. And then I think the third thing, both of my parents were relentless believers in the dignity of everybody. They, you know, my dad in the Peace Corps and Head Start, and started the Job Corps and legal services. Why? Because he saw in all these people around the world, people who are on the outside of society, gifts and qualities that we needed in the culture that were part of his faith, yes, but also part of building real democracy and real strength of meaning for all of us. You can't lock people out and still feel safe and confident that the whole country or the whole community can thrive. You cannot exclude and find meaning. You can't do it. He used to say that. My mom, the same thing. People with intellectual disabilities, you know, they were locked out everywhere when she was a kid. In institutions by the hundreds of thousands, treated as having no value. Imagine if you looked at your brother or your sister, someone you love, someone you care about, and the rest of the society looked at them and they're valueless, they're worthless, they're hopeless. My mom didn't buy it. She just wouldn't believe it. And so she was constantly, no, you can't buy that lie. Cross boundaries, broaden the circle of welcome. So these have been very powerful lessons in my life, and they brought me a lot of good things that I've been able to do. I hope a lot of growth that I've been able to hopefully, continue to be on the path myself of being, the best I can be, but also a lot of joy. Jacob, you know as well as I. You can have a lot of joy by mocking somebody in high school and making fun of them, and everybody laughs at your joke and everybody treats you like, oh, you're the cool guy, but it's short-lived.
Absolutely, it is.
It's short-lived. That kind of joy is short-lived. The other kind of joy lives long, lives long in our lives.
Absolutely. Is there anything else, any other advice, because I don't want to hold you up for too long, that you have for our listeners and for the next generation of leaders?
I mean, I think this is your moment. Your generation has an unrivaled experience right now. You have information from around the world at your fingertips. You have big open minds that allow you to see the whole world, everything, science, technology, humanities, art, music, history, archaeology, politics, you name it, poetry. You can see the whole world whenever you want. And it's given you this enormous chance to see beyond labels. My only request is do it for all of us, not just for yourselves. I think sometimes, when you're young, you feel like you got to build your own strength and your own platform or your own college application or your own, success. That's all good. I understand it's necessary. We all have to do that. We all do that as best we can. But your generation has to solve one big problem, and that is, how do we create belonging for everyone without oppression and stigma and labeling? Not just belonging for your religion or your ethnic group or your city or your community or your neighborhood or your family, whatever, those are all things that worked in the past. Honestly, they worked. People could get their own little neighborhood and build it all up, and we're the best. Nowadays, you have to add that and say, yes, we're great, but we're no better than anyone else. We've got to broaden the circle. So use all the gifts of your generation to build a sense of belonging for everyone. Look for the lonely and the left out, the stigmatized people in your community. Look for them. Don't wait for them. Don't be offering and willing to help them. Look for them. When you find them, you will find a secret to your own justice and your own joy.
Absolutely. Thank you so much for coming on. Make sure everybody to look for his book online at Amazon or at Barnes and Nobles. And have a good rest of your day. I appreciate you coming on.
Thank you, Jacob. Thanks everyone for listening.